Hi everybody, this is Dee over at Aloha Astro. Um, I did manage to get a full moon update posted across all the social media platforms this morning and in the newsletter for today's full moon, which is occurring on March the 31st, 2018 at approximately 8:37 this morning at 10 degrees 45 minutes of the cardinal air sign of Libra. What I didn't get to do until now in the early evening is to record the usual video that I do. So I'm sorry for that. It's been a busy day, probably because of the full moon. And most people, if you were to say what's the most important thing or why do people consult astrology the most, it has a lot to do with relationship. I mean, everything that we are as human beings has to do with other people, whether it's a romantic relationship or a business partnership or friendship. We're dealing with other people. So astrology is never about just us alone. And the two times of the year where we really see this the most, I feel, are the full moon at Libra and at Aries, where we have that axis of the house of self, Aries, the first house, and the seventh house, which is the house of relationship, Libra. So when those signs get triggered by full moons and things come to a head, relationship issues come up. And you may not have these two planets, moon and sun, in opposition sitting within your own personal first and seventh houses in your own natal chart, because you might have a very different rising sign or ascendant, but you may be affected nonetheless in some area of your life in terms of your expectations from another person and how you might be able to find a compromise. And a compromise is always a challenging thing when you have an opposition between planets. And to make this a little bit tougher this time around, we don't have just an opposition, we also have a T-square, because the moon in Libra is squaring Mars conjunct Saturn. And that's a particular kind of an ouch. Mars is action and Saturn wants to bring things into a concrete form or break something apart. So when I see Mars and Saturn together, I think of very harsh energy. And in the cardinal sign of Capricorn, which is an earth sign and rules the 10th house of career and the elevation point of the chart, the midheaven, where we put ourselves out in the world as authority figures or where we want to be taken seriously. We also have some intensity from Pluto in Capricorn nearby, although they are not conjunct. It's still casting its shadow there and adding some extra backup to the intensity of Mars conjunct Saturn. So I look at this as people pushing to make something real, make it happen, get a commitment, or people looking to break something apart if they are not happy with how things are going. And I can tell you all that by the second, things are going to be quieter. Right now, they might not be, and you might feel as though there's no right way to do something. And all I can say is be true to yourself, because and don't hurt another person willfully or deliberately or maliciously, but you still have to honor yourself. If you diminish yourself in some way and you make yourself less to be able to accommodate somebody else or make them happy or hold on to them or keep them or whatever, then you are actually doing them a disservice and you are being untruthful and unfair to yourself and to the other person. So it is sometimes better to let something break apart or fall apart, or to bring the issue to the head where you are brutally honest if that's what needs to happen. Mercury retrograde, I would say be cautious in the words that you use. Don't go pointing your finger at somebody and saying, well, you, and I want this, and you, don't do that. Talk about how you feel, but don't throw accusations at somebody else, and that will minimize the amount of pain or conflict that might come out of this T-square. If it's not nice and it's being deliberately cruel, then don't try not to be that way. during a Mercury retrograde time period, the things that we say, especially when it might come out in anger, as Sun-Mars aspects very often do trigger outbursts of anger, you may regret your words. You may want to take them back later. Retrograde time periods, very often we say things or do things or think things that will look entirely different once we are past Mercury retrograde. And that will occur after April 15th. And around April 16th, I believe, we have our next lunation. I'm not even going to look ahead toward that right now because we're here in this moment. And it will ease up and get lighter on Monday, when we are, the fallout from the full moon has passed and things are a little bit easier and we no longer have the tension of this T-square. Tomorrow, I believe people's energy is going to be directed more toward the aspects in here that I think have to do with family and tradition, because for many people they celebrate the Easter holiday, and we do have a little bit of relief in here that is provided by Jupiter in Scorpio making a sextile to Pluto and a trine to Neptune, and then Neptune in Pisces makes a quincunx to the North Node in Leo, and North Node in Leo trines Mercury and the Sun. Children will stand out tomorrow, of course. Anybody with children or who has children in the family knows what a joy it is on Easter for egg hunts and candy and families getting together. And I think that the tensions of the T-square and the full moon may take a back seat unless there are people in a family situation who want to be the one who's always right or in control. And in which case, I think that probably a little more politeness or courtesy will prevail, just because it is a holiday and that people are going to be thinking more about their, especially if they are Christian, religious in any way, the higher principles that come about through these two planets here. Literally, Jupiter can be God consciousness and very forgiving and accepting and allowing and uplifting, and Neptune is also similar in nature. It can be Christ principle and the idea of rescuing, saving, healing. So this trine creates some flow and some harmony, despite the fact that we have some challenge here that is going on. So I think that tomorrow there just might be agreement among people that whatever big issue, challenge, or problem might be going on in relationships would be set aside for the holiday, and that things will be more peaceful. And then whatever major decision might have to be made or dealt with or carried over, there will be calmer heads on the 2nd. So that is what's going on in here. Definitely with fire and earth being so strong, that can create dust storms, cardinal energy. It wants to be right. And we just had Venus move from Aries into Taurus, and that can really dig in its heels. That's quite stubborn. So Taurus is just testing the waters here. Venus in Taurus is just starting out at 0 degrees. This brings a pleasure and delight in family and in good food and anything that appeals to the senses or brings safety, security, pleasure. So hopefully Venus also will prevail tomorrow through the trine to Mars and Saturn in Capricorn, and traditions will carry the weight of the day and also distract us from whatever's on our mind that maybe we just can't find a compromise right now, or we can't figure out how we're going to work something out the way we might like to. And perhaps something is no longer workable. That is really the bigger thing. Is something truly workable? Is it really the right thing for you? Are you helping a situation or hindering a situation? And is it time to move on to something else? This too shall pass, just like anything else astrological. Some things pass more quickly than others. Thankfully, the moon changes signs every 2.5 days, and it will be passing out of Libra and into Scorpio by the time we get, let's see, So by the time we're into Monday, we are looking at the moon in Scorpio, and it will definitely be giving greater, I would say, feeling secure in whatever you've decided you need to say or do. And the T-square by then will have fallen apart. There can still be some anger that comes up because of this square, but squares can also be very productive. In this case, it can mean that decisions are made that even if situations are not ideal, actions still need to be taken. Or if you're waiting for resources to come in to do something, that maybe you still need to move forward and do it with what you have at hand. That necessity really can be the mother of invention. And when a moment comes and it has to be done, when something has to be done, that you go ahead and make the best of what you've got. Scorpio moon can be very determined that way on the emotional level. And Monday morning may see everybody saying, okay, holiday's over, problems need to be dealt with, or, things change. Now I have to put on my big girl panties and get on with it. So yeah, we have to just get on with it. And that's basically what Monday looks like. But it enables a better flow of communication with this quincunx here to Mercury and the Sun, and the fact that the T-square is no longer creating so much tension in terms of me versus you, or I versus we, where people are not at quite the same standoff that they might be at today. And Sunday, let's see how it's looking. Sunday, it's broken apart a bit, but I think because we still have the moon making a square here, this time to Pluto, if you've stuffed something down, it's going to be basically eating you up, maybe disturbing your sleep. Or if you've put aside the problem to enjoy the day because it's a holiday, it's in the background, it's underneath. Pluto has a tendency to either intensify things or to hide, bury things underneath, and it will still have to be dealt with. It's still present in the mind here and having some effect on how you might be relating to people, and there may be having to adjust to something new. If there's been a change in a relationship as a result of today's full moon, then this opposition here, which occurs on Sunday, tomorrow, moon opposing Uranus and conjunct Venus, that people change, their feelings change, relationships change, people grow, they have a need to follow a different path or move on or put themselves first at times. So that might be more clear. Today may be more about the tension and the outburst. Tomorrow may be integrating things, whether you like it or not, putting some things off or two in the background while you enjoy the pleasures of the day with family. The moon does make a nice quincunx here to Chiron, so there can be at least an agreement to be at peace because of the day. And it's definitely a day where children can enjoy the holiday and think of the children. And then on Monday, it looks like you can get back to life and getting back on track and moving forward. And definitely the Jupiter trying to Neptune in general, if it's time for some things to change or it's time to do some sort of a moving on, this indicates that there can be a rather rapid healing when you are made up in your mind that this is what you want. Then this brings the opening to something better, to some improvement. Maybe it can bring improvement to an existing problem or relationship, but it does bring some grace, forgiveness, healing, improvement, and a desire for growth. And here we have wanting to change for the better, wanting to make things better. And if you are looking for new love after a breakup, then this may actually bring new love in, with this springtime rather rapidly if you are open to it, and if you can let go and not hold the negativity over a breakup against a new person who comes in. If you are able to move on and literally start fresh in a new relationship with a new person without letting your problems from a past one carry over, then I think that people who are transitioning from a relationship and looking for new love can be finding it very soon, because this can mean love at first sight, love suddenly, changes in feeling, especially moving from something like friendship to falling in love. So there is opportunity for those who are maybe thinking, that's it, relationship is over, nobody loves me, I'm all alone. Not for long. I do not think for long. So let's take a look at the Sabian symbol for today. And it was a little convoluted. I didn't get a whole lot out of it until I read it like 3 times, but I've had a lot of distraction today. A professor peering over his glasses at his students. Problems attending the transmission of knowledge in a special cultural setup. And it even says, this is a rather peculiar symbol for this phase of the process. It reveals a rather humorous approach to what man's mind can accomplish at this stage. However, there seems to be no valid reason to make the image into some kind of a caricature or to sentimentalize it by referring to a kind old professor. Rather, one should analyze the picture in order to discover its basic elements. The professor has dealt so much with books that he has greatly strained his eyes. In days when bifocal lenses were not widely used, he had to peer over his glasses in order to see his students. The symbol thus simply reveals 2 aspects of the condition of professorship. That is, of being able to transfer to the young generation the vast sum of knowledge accumulated by the past. The need to absorb this enormous amount of book knowledge affects the mind as well as the eyes. In order to meet the demands of the turbulent youth, the teacher, in a sense, has to look above his knowledge and to see his students simply as human beings. This is the first symbol in the 39th fivefold sequence. It deals at the intellectual level with the teaching of accumulated collective knowledge and the problem posed by the acquisition of that knowledge. This is what instruction means, a process not to be confused with education. What I got out of this at the end is that I do see some similarity to the symbolism in our T-square that is going on, where we have the older patriarchal energy, or that professorship energy, the wisdom that comes from time passing and age, Capricorn. And it's in a T-square here with young upstart energy of Aries that doesn't know something yet, and Libra, where we bridge the gap between the professor and the students, if we look back over at the Sabian symbol. And the problem in there is to be able to take the wisdom or the knowledge and give it to a restless or a just beginning. The receiving energy there has to be able to rise up to a level of meeting the professor, and the professor has to look over his glasses here in this symbolism to be able to meet the students, and there has to be a meeting point, I feel, in between where they find some sort of common ground, or at least both of them have to be willing to make some sort of compromise to come from their very different positions, one of no knowledge at all and the other from all that accumulated knowledge, and yet be able to meet and get something from each other. So I think patience is the main thing that comes to me out of all of this, that there has to be patience, and I think an older, wiser person knows that. A teacher knows that, a parent knows that you have to be patient with the young because they don't know, and you may have to say something 100 times before a young child gets it, that you do have to instruct. So what are we being instructed in right now? What can we learn from this full moon? What is it teaching us? If we have repeatedly done something in relationship dynamics where we feel that each time we do it wrong or we come out the loser or we're just not getting it, maybe we have to look a little bit higher, or maybe we can get wisdom from somebody older or outside of us who is a position, like a professor would be, where their profession has to do with relationship or helping us see ourselves. Do we need to see a counselor? Do we need to speak to an advisor or a member of the clergy or anybody who can help us if we are dealing with relationship issues? If we're dealing with people on the job, problems at work, do we need to go talk to a manager or a boss and try to bring harmony back into the situation so that something workable comes out of it and not total destruction? But if something really does need to be changed entirely and a new platform comes up out of it, then it may be that that still has to be brought to the people who are in power or in charge so that rules change and new methods, new ways of doing things come into being. Or within a relationship, maybe there has to be a look at what is the problem and how can we fix that, and an establishment of a new way of relating or new boundaries laid down. So I would say that there has to be some sort of a bridge that goes on. And of course, Libra is asking us to find balance, harmony. It is also the sign that has to do with social strategy and diplomacy. So keep that in mind when you are communicating with others, to think of yourself as a diplomat or a negotiator rather than simply somebody who is in for themselves versus somebody else who appears to be possibly challenging you. And I think that maybe we can bridge the gap at this full moon if we find another way of looking at things, or perhaps going outside of ourselves to somebody who has greater wisdom. So this too shall pass. I hope that you are able to go out and enjoy the full moon. And if you actually are moving towards a higher level of commitment in your relationship, and the romantic energy that can be present at a Libra full moon is with you right now, I would say take it slow in the relationship. The intensity on the romantic level tonight and maybe the desire to make promises would be better discussed over the course of the next few days, or up until we get past Mercury retrograde, when things aren't going backwards in that communication area, where decisions are more likely to stick. But there can definitely be an intensification of the focus on commitment in relationship and wanting to push a relationship forward, especially under the romantic Venus-ruled Libra full moon. So many blessings, everybody, and until the next time, which will be around mid-April, be safe and enjoy your full moon tonight.